Loralei Dane was a respected high school teacher, admired for her grace and intelligence. Dorian Vale, her charming husband, was known as the man who adored her. And Seraphina Dane, her younger sister, was the golden child. Beautiful, ambitious, and envied by everyone. But behind closed doors, a secret bound them together in a web of betrayal so twisted it would shatter an entire family. What Loralei uncovered one quiet evening would not only expose the people she trusted most, it would ignite a chain of events that ended in chaos at a family celebration no one would ever forget. Loralei Vance lived a life most people would envy. She was a high school literature teacher in Portland, Oregon, known for her graceful presence, calm voice, and genuine passion for books. Her classroom walls were lined with classic novels and inspirational quotes, and her students often stayed after class just to talk about their favorite stories or ask for her advice. Her home life appeared just as fulfilling. She lived in a charming 3-bedroom house with her husband, Dorian Vance, a well-dressed, well-spoken marketing executive who turned heads wherever he went. Together, they were the kind of couple that made people believe in lasting love. High school sweethearts who grew into adulthood hand in hand, it seemed nothing could come between them. Loralei's younger sister, Seraphina Wynne, was a frequent guest in their home. Seraphina was bold, unpredictable, and magnetic in ways Loralei had never been. She was 5 years younger, spontaneous to the point of recklessness, and worked in the creative arts scene in Seattle. Whenever life in the city became too hectic, Seraphina would show up at Loralei's doorstep with a small suitcase and an open invitation to stay as long as she needed. Loralei had always welcomed her. Despite Seraphina's impulsive nature, she was family, and the two sisters shared a bond that had remained mostly unshaken through the years. Dorian was always kind to Seraphina, perhaps too kind. But Loralei never questioned it. She believed kindness was simply part of who he was. Dorian was a man who made everyone feel special. Whether he was complimenting a waiter's attentiveness or offering to carry groceries for an elderly neighbor, he had a way of making people smile. Loralei chalked up his occasional glances at Seraphina to harmless familiarity. After all, they were family. What reason would she have to doubt them? In the quiet hours of the evening, Loralei often found herself grading papers while Dorian worked in his home office. They shared meals, took weekend hikes, and spent long Sundays curled up watching old movies. Life had a steady rhythm, but over time, subtle changes began to creep in. Dorian's late work nights became more frequent. He stopped talking about his day. Seraphina's visits grew longer and more spontaneous. Once staying for a weekend, she now lingered for weeks. Still, Loralei didn't voice her concerns. She reasoned it away, believing stress and routine were common in any long-term relationship. The first moment that tugged at her attention was a missed detail. One morning, she found Seraphina's necklace, an ornate gold chain Loralei remembered, gifting her years ago, sitting on the bathroom counter in Dorian's shaving kit. She hesitated, confused by its placement, but convinced herself it must have been a mistake. Maybe Seraphina borrowed the kit or placed it there absent-mindedly. She dismissed it, but the unease stayed. Then there was the photo. At a family barbecue, hosted by Loralei and Dorian, someone snapped a candid picture of the three of them standing close together. When Loralei later reviewed the photos on her phone, she noticed something odd. Dorian's hand was resting behind Seraphina's back, slightly hidden from view. It looked innocent at first glance. But zoomed in, the positioning seemed too comfortable. Not brotherly, not casual. It sent a chill down her spine, but again, she said nothing. Loralei prided herself on being rational, logical. She taught critical thinking and appreciated nuance. Accusations without evidence felt beneath her. Yet, the feeling that something was wrong had begun to simmer in the back of her mind. Her dreams became restless. She found herself watching them when they weren't, looking, trying to catch fleeting expressions or half-finished sentences. Still, she never confronted either of them. The turning point came one afternoon while she was preparing for Dorian's birthday. She had taken the day off from school to decorate the house and wrap the gifts she had hidden in her closet. While searching for extra tape in the hallway drawer, she found an envelope. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Seraphina's. It was addressed to Dorian. Loralei's heart thudded as she stared at the envelope for a long minute, frozen. Eventually, curiosity and dread took over. She opened it. Inside was a handwritten poem. It was sensual, personal, and romantic in tone. There were references to late nights, secret touches, and shared moments that had nothing to do with friendship or family. The signature at the bottom read, "Yours always, S." Loralei sat on the floor, the letter trembling in her hands. She read it 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words were clear. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Her sister had written a love letter to her husband, and somehow he had kept it in their home, like a souvenir. Everything in her life, her home, her marriage, her family, shifted in that moment. The warm, comforting reality she thought she lived in now felt like a stage set, with cheap backdrops and flimsy props. Her chest felt hollow, her stomach sick, but she didn't cry, not then. Instead, a strange calm washed over her. She put the letter back, perfectly, exactly as she found it. She closed the drawer, took a deep breath, and stood up. In her mind, questions screamed for answers. But louder than those was a single, steady thought. She needed to be sure. Loralei knew she had just found the edge of something deep, and she was ready to jump in, no matter how dark it would get. Loralei moved through the following days like a ghost. On the surface, she remained composed, teaching her classes, answering emails, cooking dinners. But inside, her thoughts were tangled in a growing web of betrayal. The letter had cracked, something deep within her, but she wasn't ready to confront it openly. Not yet. She needed more than poetic lines and suspicious glances. She needed proof. Not only for herself, but so there would be no way for anyone to lie their way out of it. Dorian's birthday was fast approaching, and Loralei saw the upcoming celebration as an opportunity. Friends, colleagues, and family, including Seraphina, would all be gathered under one roof. If anything could expose hidden intentions, it would happen in the presence of those closest to them. Until then, she kept her suspicions hidden and began quietly observing the patterns unfolding around her. It began with small things she had overlooked before. Dorian's phone, once casually left around the house, was now locked and kept on silent. He took calls outside or in his car, whispering in hushed tones that didn't match the tone of a marketing executive discussing campaigns. Seraphina, too, had become more guarded. She spent less time with Loralei and more time in the guest room with the door shut, claiming to be working on an art portfolio. She kept her phone face down at all times and always seemed to be watching Dorian with something deeper than sisterly affection. On a quiet Thursday evening, while Dorian was at a supposed late-night work meeting and Seraphina had gone out for drinks, Loralei took her chance. She entered Dorian's office, a room she rarely touched out of respect for his privacy. She told herself she wasn't being invasive, just protecting herself from the lies she already sensed. She started with his desk drawers. Neatly organized papers, receipts, and contracts filled the spaces. Nothing unusual stood out until she reached a locked drawer on the bottom right. She had never seen it locked before. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked to their bedroom and found the spare key he kept hidden in his tie drawer. Back at the desk, she slid the key in. The drawer clicked open. Inside was a slim laptop, not the one he used for work. This one was sleek, unfamiliar, almost brand new. Loralei opened it, her heartbeat rising. It booted up quickly, without needing a password, which surprised her. What she found inside confirmed everything she feared, and more. There was a folder, labeled Muse. She clicked it, bracing herself. What opened was a chilling gallery of images, videos, and emails between Dorian and Seraphina. The photos were intimate. Secret vacations Loralei had never heard about, Notes written in Serafina's handwriting scanned and stored. Images of them together in ways that left no doubt. The emails were worse. They talked about Loralei like she was a problem they were working around. Serafina wrote about how exhausting it was to keep the act going, and Dorian reassured her with promises. He spoke of a future together. He said he was working on it, working on finding a way to leave his wife without ruining his image. He even suggested Loralei might not take it well, and joked that she was too sensitive for the real world. Loralei sat in stunned silence, scrolling, clicking, reading. Her stomach turned as she realized just how long this had been happening. It hadn't been a fling. It was a full-blown affair, built on layers of deception, planned behind her back by the two people she trusted most. She wasn't even collateral damage. She was an obstacle. She copied everything onto a flash drive, careful not to leave any traces of her snooping. Then she closed the laptop, locked the drawer, and returned the key. Her body felt hollow, her heart like stone. That night she didn't sleep. She lay in bed beside Dorian when he returned home, pretending to be asleep, listening to the sound of his breathing. In the silence, her mind sharpened. There was no room left for confusion. In the morning, she acted as though nothing had changed. She smiled as she kissed Dorian goodbye. She even helped Serafina pick out a dress for the party. But behind her eyes, something had shifted permanently. Over the next few days, Loralei began planning. She reached out to a friend from college, who now worked in tech security, and asked him how to discreetly retrieve data from a locked phone. She bought a small recording device, one that could capture voices clearly from across a room. She started collecting anything that could be used as evidence: texts, receipts, emails, photos. She checked Dorian's phone whenever he left it, unattended for a second. She learned how to mirror his device to her computer. Every move they made, she traced it. When Serafina left the house one afternoon, Loralei slipped into the guest room and searched her purse. She found a hotel keycard and a folded receipt for a room Dorian had supposedly booked for a business client. The signature at the bottom was Serafina's. By the end of the week, Loralei had built a complete archive of their affair. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she felt a powerful clarity settle over her. She decided that the birthday party would not only celebrate Dorian, it would be the perfect stage for her revenge, and she would not confront them in private. No whispered accusations. No chance for denial. They had made her an audience to their betrayal, and now she would return the favor. But first, she needed to make sure everything played out perfectly. Because if she was going to shatter their lives, she was going to do it in a way they would never forget. The day of Dorian's birthday party arrived with a deceptive calm. The sun filtered softly through the curtains as Loralei moved through the house with mechanical precision, preparing for the guests. Balloons in silver and navy blue floated near the ceiling, and a custom cake stood on the dining table with "Happy 37th Dorian" scrawled in elegant lettering. Music played softly in the background. The scent of candles and catered appetizers filled the air. Everything looked perfect, just as everyone expected it to be. Guests began arriving by late afternoon. Friends from work, distant cousins, a few former college buddies. The house slowly filled with laughter, small talk, and the clinking of glasses. Dorian stood in the center of it all, smiling and charming as always. His arms draped around Serafina more than once, under the excuse of playful sibling affection. But Loralei noticed the way his fingers lingered just a little too long on her back. Serafina wore a crimson dress that hugged her curves, and her smile was overly bright, her eyes darting to Loralei every so often to check for a reaction. Loralei gave them none. She smiled warmly, refilled drinks, greeted every guest, and posed beside her husband in dozens of pictures. The camera caught a picture-perfect couple, the beloved high school teacher and her successful marketing executive husband, surrounded by loved ones. No one suspected the storm gathering behind her carefully painted expression. Everything was timed. Loralei had rehearsed it in her mind a dozen times. At 7:15 p.m., the birthday toast would begin. Everyone would be gathered in the main room. The lights would dim, and a short slideshow Dorian had requested would play on the living room television, or at least that's what they thought would happen. As the hour approached, Loralei signaled her friend Mira, who was managing the Bluetooth speaker and media setup. Mira, unaware of the full plan, believed she was helping with a surprise tribute video. Loralei handed her the flash drive with a soft thank you and returned to the room. She glanced at her husband. Dorian was laughing at a joke, drink in hand, arm lightly brushing against Serafina's. He looked relaxed, confident, and blissfully unaware that the ground beneath him was moments from collapsing. At 7:15 sharp, Loralei clinked her glass and, a call for attention, the room fell quiet. Dorian looked over, beaming. "Before we cut the cake," she said, her voice smooth, "I put together something special for Dorian. A few memories, some surprises, and a reminder of how much we all love him." Applause followed. People moved closer, settling into the couches and standing near the walls. Mira hit play. For the first few seconds, the screen displayed typical birthday slideshow material. Pictures from vacations, childhood snapshots, a short clip of Dorian dancing terribly at their wedding. Everyone laughed and clapped. Then, the screen went black for a moment. A new video began. No one was prepared for what followed. It started with a blurry clip of Serafina and Dorian entering a hotel room. The date was just 2 weeks prior. Then came screenshots of emails, laced with romantic lines and promises of a future. Messages like, "When are you telling her?" and "Last night felt so right. It always does." Whispers rose around the room like a wave. The laughter died instantly. The footage switched to voice recordings. Serafina's voice. "She's never going to see it coming. I know her." Dorian's reply. "She's too wrapped up in her job and her students. She doesn't even look at me anymore." The silence in the room turned thick and choking. Gasps echoed from the crowd as an image of Dorian and Serafina in bed appeared, clearly taken from a hidden camera. People turned away. Someone dropped a glass, the sound sharp in the still room. Mira, frozen by the television, turned to look at Loralei in disbelief. Loralei stood calm and composed in the middle of the chaos. Her eyes never left her husband. Dorian had gone pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at Loralei, then Serafina, who had turned crimson and was frantically trying to grab the remote. But Mira stepped in before she could. "Don't," Mira said quietly. The final clip played. An email draft written by Dorian but never sent. It read, "Once this party's over, I'll finally tell her. We'll leave together. She'll understand eventually. She always does." When the video ended, no one moved. No one knew what to say. Loralei raised her glass one last time. "Happy birthday, Dorian." Then she walked out of the room. She didn't look back as the guests began to erupt in stunned chatter. Some rushed after her. Others turned to Serafina and Dorian, who now stood paralyzed, exposed in every way imaginable. The carefully curated image of a loving couple and devoted sister had been demolished in front of family, friends, and colleagues. As she walked through the front door and into the night air, Loralei finally breathed. Her hands trembled slightly, not from regret, but release. Months of quiet pain, of pretending not to see what was happening right under her nose, had built up to this moment. And now that it was done, she didn't feel guilt, only clarity. In one single strike, she had returned the betrayal with precision. Not through violence, not with screams, but with truth. Unfiltered, undeniable truth. And as she disappeared into the night, she knew the fallout would be just beginning. Loralei didn't go far after leaving the house. She sat in her car, parked 3 blocks away, watching as people began pouring out of her home. Some left in silence, others whispering furiously to their partners or into their phones. A few were, visibly shaken, clutching their coats tighter against the cool night air, unable to process what had just unfolded. The chaos she left behind was deliberate. She hadn't wanted to hurt them, her friends, her colleagues, or the distant relatives who had nothing to do with it. But it was a necessary casualty in revealing the truth. The performance had to be public. Otherwise, they would have painted her as hysterical, jealous, or vindictive. She needed them to see it themselves. And now they had. She waited another 15 minutes before starting the engine and driving off, heading not home, but to a small rental apartment she had secretly acquired 2 months ago. It was modest, furnished with only the essentials, and unknown to Dorian or Serafina. For months she had prepared for the moment when she'd need to disappear, not run away, but reclaim her space. That night, she lit a candle, changed into comfortable clothes, and opened the file folder that held every printed copy of evidence she had gathered. Photos, call logs, hotel receipts. It was all there, stacked like chapters of a book no one had ever wanted to read. She didn't cry. The sadness had burned away weeks ago. Now, all she felt was a strange kind of emptiness. Back at the house, everything was falling apart. Dorian had tried to chase after her but was quickly intercepted by Serafina, who was panicking about the guests, the scandal, and her ruined reputation. The two ended up shouting in the kitchen while the remaining guests awkwardly filtered out, trying not to make eye contact. Word spread quickly, first through text messages, then social media. Some guests had filmed the video. Others were already sending it around to friends who weren't at the party. Within an hour, the once picturesque couple was the center of a local scandal. Dorian called Loralei that night, 16 times. Then he tried messaging her through every platform he could think of. His tone shifted quickly, from angry to apologetic, from excuses to begging. She ignored every single attempt. By morning, she blocked him. She hadn't exposed him for revenge. She had done it for closure. There was nothing left to say. Over the next few days, Loralei continued to teach at the high school like nothing had changed. Her students noticed she seemed quieter, more focused. Staff members gave her sympathetic nods in the hallway. Word had gotten around, of course, but no one dared ask her directly. Her composed presence only deepened the mystery for those who hadn't been at the party. She was a woman wronged, but one who had chosen truth over fury. That alone made people uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do with someone who held her head high after devastation. Serafina, on the other hand, had gone silent. Her phone was off. Her social media accounts vanished overnight. She had left her job at the boutique without a word. Rumors said she had gone to stay with an old friend out of town, too embarrassed to face anyone in the city. She had underestimated Loralei. She had believed that her role as the younger, more charming sister would protect her. But no charm could erase what had been broadcasted in front of dozens of people. Dorian tried damage control. He released a carefully worded statement to his colleagues, blaming emotional distance in the marriage and miscommunication, trying to make it sound like a mutual falling out. But it didn't work. Everyone had seen the video. He was slowly being phased out of projects, clients pulled back, and whispers followed him everywhere. His image as the loyal husband, the reliable leader, the polished family man, it all crumbled. Meanwhile, Loralei met with a lawyer. She filed for divorce immediately. She provided the evidence, the video, the timeline. Her lawyer was stunned by how thoroughly prepared she was. She didn't want anything from Dorian. No alimony, no possessions, just her peace. That was the only thing she had ever wanted. Days turned to weeks. The media never picked up the story. Too small, too personal. But within the town, it was legend. People began viewing Loralei differently. Not with pity, but with a strange kind of respect. She had turned betrayal into a lesson, a performance that no one could forget. Students whispered about it in hushed tones. Some even speculated that she might write a book someday. Dorian, stripped of his reputation, tried to rebuild, but the cracks in his image never fully closed. He moved out of town after the divorce was finalized. He didn't leave a forwarding address. Serafina eventually returned, but she no longer carried herself with the same arrogance. She avoided eye contact with Loralei when they accidentally crossed paths in the grocery store weeks later. She had lost more than a sister. She had lost the trust of everyone who once admired her. But Loralei, she kept going. She returned to her quiet apartment each night, read novels, drank tea, and found new rhythms in her days. The pain lingered, yes, but so did a new kind of strength, one that didn't need to be loud, one that didn't seek revenge, one that had already done the loudest thing imaginable and walked away. 3 months passed. The cold bitterness of winter slowly gave way to the soft bloom of early spring. Loralei remained in her small apartment, tucked away from the mess she had once called a life. Though the world outside began to blossom, she kept herself grounded in routine. She woke early, ran by the riverbank, taught her classes, and came home to silence. There was something healing about the consistency. No more pretending. No more secrets to uncover. The storm had passed, leaving behind broken pieces, but she had already started rearranging them into something that resembled peace. She had avoided her family in those months, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Her mother had called once, and her father sent a card with no return address. Neither knew what to say, and she didn't demand it. The betrayal had cut too deep, not just because of the affair, but because no one had seen it coming. They had all watched her marriage with admiration, had praised Dorian at every family dinner, and spoken about how lucky she was. And Serafina, always the golden child, had taken the one thing that wasn't hers. To take silence, Loralei realized, was sometimes the only boundary people understood. The school year moved on, and the spring semester brought with it a new group of students. Loralei found herself invested in them in a way she hadn't been before. Her lectures felt more passionate, her time in the classroom more meaningful. Teaching had always been her anchor, but now it became her purpose. It was the one place where honesty still meant something. She never told anyone what she was planning, not her colleagues, not her students, and certainly not her family. While others assumed she was simply rebuilding her life quietly, Loralei was quietly preparing something bigger. Not revenge, but a release. For months, she had written in secret, pouring every emotion into a manuscript. It wasn't a memoir, not exactly, and it wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the illusions people build around their lives, the curated relationships, the fake smiles, the lies people swallow to keep the peace. She didn't use real names, but anyone who knew her would recognize the story. She submitted it, under a pen name, to a small independent publisher known for honest, raw storytelling. To her surprise, they responded within weeks. The editor wrote that they were deeply moved. They wanted to publish it immediately. It wasn't long before the story gained traction, especially in literary circles that celebrated female voices, who had endured the unthinkable and survived with grace. The book was titled The House with No Walls. Its release sent a ripple through the town. Though Loralei never publicly confirmed her authorship, people connected the dots. Her colleagues gave her knowing looks. Former students reached out, some thanking her for her courage. Even strangers stopped her at the grocery store to say how deeply the book had touched them. But the most unexpected response came from Serafina. One evening, Loralei returned home to find a letter wedged in her mailbox. It was written on thick, expensive paper. The handwriting was familiar. Serafina hadn't signed her name, but there was no need. The letter wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was a reflection. A messy, vulnerable unraveling of guilt, regret, and the emptiness left behind. She spoke of Dorian, how the relationship crumbled quickly after being exposed, how she realized she had mistaken possession for love. She wrote about feeling like a ghost in her own body, hated by the people who once adored her. Loralei read the letter once and never read it again. She didn't respond. Some wounds didn't need to be reopened, even when the person who caused them came crawling back. She didn't hate her sister anymore, but she didn't trust her either. Forgiveness, she understood now, didn't always mean reconciliation. On the night the book officially launched in a nearby city, Loralei stood in front of a small but eager audience. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her posture steady. She didn't read a passage from the book. Instead, she spoke of freedom, the kind that doesn't come with applause or validation, but with the quiet knowledge that you faced the worst and kept going. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble, she smiled, a real smile. After the event, she walked alone to a nearby cafe, sat by the window, and sipped her tea slowly. She watched the world outside move forward. People walking, cars passing, couples laughing. Everything kept moving, and so did she. Dorian had left the town completely. No one knew where he was. His name hadn't been spoken aloud in months. He had become a ghost in the story, a shadow that no longer held power. Serafina returned to her old life in bits and pieces, but the shine was gone. Without the admiration, she became someone ordinary, just another face in a crowded town. Loralei didn't want admiration. She only wanted truth. And now she had it. The life she once built was gone, but in its place was something far more valuable, herself. She had learned that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it simply meant walking away without looking back. And so, as spring settled into full bloom, Loralei moved forward. The scars remained, but they no longer bled. The past didn't define her. It had shaped her, yes, but it no longer held her. The woman who once stood in the wreckage had found her way out, and she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was free.